Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. The day I got the keys to my first house was the best day of my life. I had no idea it was also the day I unofficially declared war on the suburban queen of the cul-de-sac, a woman who seemed to have the 911 dispatch on speed dial. I'm a software developer who works remotely, and after years of throwing money away on rent, I finally saved enough for a down payment. The house I found was perfect for my budget. A 1960s ranch that was structurally solid but cosmetically stuck in a time warp. The kitchen had original avocado green appliances, and the living room featured wood paneling that would make a cabin jealous. But it had character, including these amazing built-in bookshelves that convinced me this was the one. Plus, the garage was big enough for my real passion project, a 1972 motorcycle I'd been slowly restoring for the past 3 years. The neighborhood seemed ideal. Quiet, tree-lined streets, well-maintained houses, the kind of place where kids still rode bikes and neighbors waved to each other. I was so excited to finally have my own space, my own garage, my own slice of the American dream. That excitement lasted exactly 3 days. I was unpacking boxes on my front porch when she appeared. Picture the most stereotypical suburban mom you can imagine. Then add a layer of self-importance and a dash of barely concealed hostility. She introduced herself as the head of the unofficial neighborhood welcome committee and mentioned she'd known the previous owner, an elderly woman, for 30 years. The conversation started friendly enough, but quickly turned into what felt like an interrogation. She asked about my job, whether I was renting or buying, if I had family in the area. Her eyes kept drifting to my 8-year-old Honda Civic parked in the driveway like it was personally offending her. When I mentioned I worked from home, she made this comment about how we all look out for each other here, delivered with a tone that sounded more like a warning than welcome. I should have paid more attention to that warning. The first incident happened the following Saturday. I'd finally found time to work on my motorcycle, so I rolled it into the garage and opened the door to let in some natural light. I had my Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock at a perfectly reasonable volume while I cleaned the carburetor. It was maybe 2 p.m., a beautiful sunny afternoon, and I was in heaven finally having my own workspace. That peace was shattered when 2 police cruisers pulled into my driveway. I walked out of the garage confused and honestly a little panicked. The officers were professional but serious when they explained they'd received a call about suspicious activity and a possible forced entry. I just stared at them for a moment, trying to process what they were saying. One officer asked if I lived here, and I explained I was the new owner. The other asked for identification, so I pulled out my driver's license with my new address and showed them the digital closing documents on my phone. I could see their entire demeanor shift as they realized what was happening. The older officer shook his head and said they'd been getting a lot of these calls lately. They apologized for the inconvenience and left, but not before one of them mentioned I might want to keep my paperwork handy just in case. As their cars pulled away, I glanced across the street and saw a curtain quickly snap shut in the front window of the house directly across from mine. There was absolutely no doubt who had made that call. After I cooled down, I decided to handle this like an adult. I walked across the street and knocked on her front door. When she answered, I introduced myself again and politely explained that there had been a misunderstanding. I told her I was the new owner and she didn't need to call the police if she saw me at my own house. Her response was not what I expected from a reasonable adult. She got defensive immediately, saying she had no way of knowing who I was and that all the noise from my garage was alarming. She actually told me I didn't fit the profile of the neighborhood and that she had every right to protect her community. The way she said it, looking me up and down like I was some kind of threat, made it clear this wasn't about a simple misunderstanding. I walked away from that conversation realizing that politeness and reason weren't going to work here. This wasn't about her not knowing who I was. This was about her not wanting me here. If she wanted to play games, I could play games too. The second incident happened 2 weeks later. I had a couple friends over for a Sunday barbecue. Nothing crazy, just 3 guys grilling burgers and talking about work. We weren't being loud, weren't drinking excessively, just enjoying a nice afternoon in my backyard. The police showed up around 4 p.m., responding to a noise complaint about an unruly gathering. The officers looked around at 3 people sitting calmly around a picnic table, and I could see the annoyance on their faces. One of them actually apologized and said they were required to respond to all calls. They left after about 5 minutes, but I could see them talking in their car before they drove away, probably wondering why they keep getting called to this address. After that incident, I invested in a good security camera system. I made sure all the cameras only pointed at my own property, but they covered every angle of my house and yard. I also started keeping a detailed log of every police visit, the date, time, what I was doing, and what reason was given for the call. The third incident was even more ridiculous. I work late sometimes, especially when dealing with clients in different time zones. One night, I was up until about 11:30 p.m. finishing a project with just my home office light on. The next thing I know, there's knocking on my door at midnight. Two officers were there responding to a report of suspicious activity, with the caller suggesting someone might be casing the house for a break-in. I showed them my home office setup, explained I was working late, and they left shaking their heads. But I was starting to get seriously concerned. These weren't just annoying inconveniences anymore. This was harassment that was creating a record of police calls to my address. The final straw came 3 weeks later, and it was genuinely frightening. I'd ordered some computer equipment online and got a notification that it had been delivered. It was about 9 p.m. when I opened my front door to grab the package from the porch. I was in my pajamas and slippers, clearly just stepping out to get my own delivery. 15 minutes later, 4 police cars showed up with lights flashing. Officers got out with their hands on their weapons and ordered me to show my hands and step away from the door. They'd received a call about a prowler attempting to break in, possibly armed. It took several minutes to de-escalate the situation and prove I lived there. The officers were apologetic once they realized what was happening, but I was shaking. This had gone way beyond annoying. This was dangerous. If I'd made any sudden movements or if the officers had been having a bad day, this could have ended very differently. That night I decided enough was enough. This woman was using the police as her personal harassment tool, wasting emergency resources and putting me at risk. It was time to fight back, but I was going to do it the right way. The next morning, I called the police department's non-emergency number and asked to speak with a supervisor. I calmly explained the situation to the sergeant, telling him I had documentation of multiple false 911 calls from my neighbor and video evidence for each incident. I emphasized that this was tying up emergency resources and had escalated to the point where officers were responding with weapons drawn to someone getting their own mail. The sergeant took it seriously and advised me on filing a formal complaint for misuse of emergency services. He said they'd been noticing a pattern of calls from that address about my house and were already concerned about resource allocation. I spent that afternoon compiling everything, my detailed log, screenshots from my security cameras showing exactly what I was doing during each incident, and copies of all the police reports. I filed the formal complaint and provided copies of all my evidence. But I wasn't done yet. The malicious compliance part of my brain kicked in, and I decided to let the community know what was happening. I wrote a very carefully worded post for our neighborhood's community page on social media. I kept it factual and professional, explaining that I was the new homeowner and wanted to provide clarity about the frequent police presence at my address. I listed each incident objectively: the dates, times, what the calls were about, and what the police actually found when they arrived. I attached short video clips from my security cameras showing exactly what I was doing during each supposed emergency. Working on my motorcycle, having a quiet barbecue, sitting at my computer, getting my own package. The evidence was undeniable. I never mentioned her name or address, but everyone knew who was making the calls. The post made me look like a reasonable victim and made the anonymous caller look completely unhinged. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments started pouring in from neighbors expressing support and sharing their own stories about feeling intimidated by the same person. Apparently, I wasn't her first target. She'd been the self-appointed neighborhood watch for years, but no one had ever documented it or fought back. Within 48 hours, there was a police car parked in front of her house for over an hour. I later learned she'd been issued a significant fine for misuse of emergency services and given an official warning about harassment, with the threat of criminal charges if there were any future incidents. The social consequences were just as satisfying. She lost all her perceived authority in the neighborhood overnight. People stopped treating her like the unofficial HOA president and started seeing her for what she really was: a bully who'd been using fear tactics to control people. Other neighbors who had been quietly intimidated by her for years started coming forward. The elderly man next door brought me a plate of cookies and apologized for not speaking up sooner. A family down the street invited me to their kid's birthday party. Suddenly I was part of the community instead of being treated like an outsider. The harassment stopped completely. No more police visits, no more watching eyes from across the street. She and her husband became social outcasts, no longer holding court from their front porch like they used to. A few months later, I was in my garage with the door wide open, putting the finishing touches on my motorcycle restoration. The sun was shining, classic rock was playing from my speaker, and a neighbor walking by stopped to compliment the bike. It was exactly the peaceful Saturday afternoon I'd imagined when I first bought the house. She tried to use the system against me. The police, the neighborhood social structure, the assumption that she belonged here more than I did. But I just used the same system better. I didn't yell or seek petty revenge. I built a case, presented facts, and let the evidence speak for itself. She didn't just get a fine. She lost the one thing she actually cared about: her perceived authority over the neighborhood. I came out on top, not by lowering myself to her level, but by rising above it and playing by the rules she thought she controlled. Now, when I pull into my driveway after work, I don't wonder if police cars will be waiting for me. When I fire up my motorcycle on Saturday mornings, I don't worry about being reported for suspicious activity. When I have friends over for dinner, I don't expect noise complaints. My house finally feels like home. The avocado green appliances don't seem so outdated anymore, and those built-in bookshelves are filled with technical manuals and motorcycle magazines. The garage has become my sanctuary, where I can work on projects without fear of being reported as a suspicious person. The whole experience taught me something important about standing up for yourself. For weeks, I let her harassment escalate because I was trying to be the bigger person, thinking that being polite and reasonable would eventually work. But some people mistake kindness for weakness, and they'll keep pushing until you push back. The key was fighting smart instead of fighting dirty. I didn't slash her tires or egg her house. I documented everything, followed proper procedures, and let the facts tell the story. When you're dealing with someone who thinks they own the neighborhood, the best revenge is proving they don't own anything except their own delusions. Sometimes I see her husband working in their yard, and we nod politely to each other like normal neighbors. She still lives across the street, but she stays inside mostly. The few times I've seen her, she avoids eye contact and hurries back into her house. The power dynamic has completely shifted. The best part is how the neighborhood has changed. People actually talk to each other now instead of walking around on eggshells. There's a group chat where neighbors share restaurant recommendations and organize block parties. Kids play in the street again without their parents worrying about complaints. It turns out when you remove one toxic person's influence, an entire community can heal. I kept all the documentation from those early months, the police reports, the security footage, the social media posts, not because I expect more trouble, but as a reminder of what happens when you stand up for yourself the right way. Fighting back doesn't always mean fighting dirty. Sometimes the most devastating response is simply refusing to be intimidated and letting the truth speak for itself. Looking back, I realize she did me a favor in a twisted way. Her harassment forced me to really establish myself in the neighborhood and connect with people I might have never met otherwise. The adversity brought out the best in the community and showed me what kind of neighbors I really had. Now, when new people move into the neighborhood, I make sure to introduce myself and welcome them properly. I tell them about the community chat, invite them to block parties, and let them know they can reach out if they need anything. It's the kind of welcome I wish I'd received, but it's also the kind of community I'm proud to be part of. The motorcycle is finally finished, a beautiful 1972 machine that purrs like a kitten and turns heads when I ride through the neighborhood. Sometimes I take it out on weekend mornings just because I can, enjoying the freedom of my own garage and my own street without worrying about who might be watching or what they might report. That's the real victory here. Not that she got fined or lost her social standing, but that I got to keep my home and my peace of mind. She tried to make me feel like I didn't belong, but now I'm more rooted in this community than she ever was. She built her authority on fear and intimidation. I built mine on truth and standing up for what's right. The house across the street might have the same owner, but the neighborhood belongs to all of us now. And that makes coming home every day feel like the victory it was always supposed to be. Every time I pull into my driveway, start up my motorcycle, or just sit on my front porch enjoying a quiet evening, I remember that this is what I was fighting for. Not just the right to live in my house without harassment, but the right to feel at home in my own neighborhood. She may have started this war, but I'm the one who got to define how it ended. Justice served, community restored, and lesson learned. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well, especially when you can document it all with security cameras. Update, 6 months later. I never expected this story to blow up the way it did, but the messages and comments have been incredible. A lot of people asked for an update, and honestly, things have gotten even better than I could have imagined. First, the legal stuff. That fine she got was apparently just the beginning. About 2 months after my original post, I found out through our neighborhood chat that she was actually charged with multiple counts of filing false police reports. Turns out the police department had been building a case against her for months, and my formal complaint with all the video evidence was the final piece they needed. She ended up having to pay over $3,000 in fines and court costs, plus she got 6 months of probation. During the court proceedings, it came out that she'd been making false reports about other neighbors for years, not just me. The elderly man next door had been getting visits from animal control because she kept reporting his perfectly well cared for dog as neglected. A family with teenagers got multiple visits from police for noise complaints during normal daytime activities. The prosecutor told the judge that my documentation was crucial in establishing the pattern of abuse. All those security camera clips and detailed logs I kept showed exactly how she was weaponizing emergency services against people she didn't like. But here's the really satisfying part. During her probation, she's not allowed to call 911 unless there's an actual emergency that she witnesses firsthand. If she makes any false reports during those 6 months, she faces jail time. The police department actually flagged her address in their system, so any calls from her house get extra scrutiny. The neighborhood transformation has been amazing. Remember how I mentioned other people started coming forward with their own stories? Well, it turns out she'd been terrorizing this community for over a decade. Once people realized they didn't have to be afraid of her anymore, the stories started pouring out. The family down the street told me she used to call code enforcement on them constantly for things like leaving their trash cans out an hour too long or having a small oil stain on their driveway. Another neighbor said she'd been reporting their teenage son for loitering whenever he sat on their own front porch talking to friends. We ended up organizing an actual neighborhood committee, a real one, not her self-appointed dictatorship. We meet once a month to discuss actual community issues like organizing block parties, coordinating snow removal, and planning the community garden we're putting in at the end of the street. The best part is how the kids have responded. There are children playing outside again, riding bikes, having fun without their parents constantly looking over their shoulders. One family told me their kids had been afraid to play in their own backyard because she would come over and yell at them for being too loud during normal daytime hours. As for her personally, the social isolation has been complete. Her husband still waves when he sees me, and I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he's actually pretty embarrassed about the whole situation. Word is that he had no idea how bad her behavior had gotten until everything came out in court. She tried to sell the house about 4 months ago, but the listing got pulled after 2 weeks. I'm guessing potential buyers started Googling the address and found news articles about the court case. The local paper did a story about misuse of emergency services, and while they didn't use names, anyone who searched the public court records could connect the dots. My motorcycle restoration project has become something of a neighborhood attraction. I've had several people stop by asking about the bike, and I even helped one teenager down the street start working on an old dirt bike his grandfather gave him. Having that garage open and welcoming has become a symbol of how the neighborhood has changed. The security cameras are still up, but mostly they just record peaceful suburban life now. Neighbors walking dogs, kids playing, delivery trucks, normal stuff. Sometimes I review the footage just to appreciate how quiet and normal everything has become. One unexpected development. I've become something of a local expert on dealing with harassment and false police reports. I've had 3 different people from other neighborhoods reach out asking for advice on similar situations. I always tell them the same thing. Document everything, stay calm, and let the system work. Don't sink to their level, just build an airtight case and present the facts. The police department actually used my case as a training example for their officers about recognizing patterns of harassment through false reports. The sergeant who handled my complaint said it was one of the most well-documented cases they'd ever seen, and it helped them develop better procedures for identifying and stopping this kind of abuse. Looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd just stayed quiet and put up with the harassment. How many more false emergency calls would there have been? How many other neighbors would have suffered in silence? Sometimes standing up for yourself ends up standing up for everyone. The house has appreciated in value significantly, partly because the neighborhood has become such a desirable place to live again. Property values had apparently been stagnant for years because potential buyers could sense the tension in the community. Now houses sell quickly and families are excited to move here. I finally finished the kitchen renovation last month, got rid of those avocado green appliances and updated everything while keeping the original character of the house. Had a big housewarming party with the whole neighborhood invited. Even served food in the garage where this whole thing started, with the motorcycle proudly displayed as the centerpiece. The most rewarding moment came during that party when the elderly man next door pulled me aside to thank me. He said he'd been thinking about moving because he couldn't handle the constant harassment, but now he's planning to stay and enjoy his retirement in peace. That's what this was really about. Not just my right to live peacefully in my own home, but everyone's right to feel safe and welcome in their own neighborhood. She tried to create a climate of fear and control, but communities are stronger than any one person's need for power. The legal system worked exactly as it should have. The documentation was key, the proper channels were respected, and justice was served without anyone having to resort to vigilante tactics or neighborhood drama. Sometimes the boring, methodical approach is the most devastating response of all. 6 months later, life is exactly what I hoped it would be when I bought this house. Quiet mornings working on projects, friendly neighbors, community events, and the simple pleasure of feeling at home in your own space. She's still across the street, but she might as well be invisible for all the impact she has on daily life here. The motorcycle runs perfectly now. The house is everything I dreamed it could be, and the neighborhood has become the kind of place where people actually want to live instead of just endure. Sometimes the best endings are the quiet ones where everyone just gets to be happy and normal. That's my update. Still riding, still enjoying my garage, still grateful I stood up for myself and everyone else she was tormenting. Justice served, peace restored, and lessons learned all around. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This story takes place about 20 years ago. In the mid-2000s, my friends and I would frequent a small billiards place in a neighboring town where you could rent a table by the hour or play per game. We'd play a few games, watch whatever sports were on TV, and have casual conversations. There were no problems and no drama until about 3 months of us visiting this place. A guy shows and takes our spot at the billiards table. No big deal. We were all chatting anyway. 20 minutes later, my friend lets him know we want to play next game, and the jerk is super dismissive. Needless to say, we didn't get in during the next game, so I politely let him know we wanted to play next. Another lady chimed in. She wanted the game after us. The guy blatantly ignored me and the other woman. Some more time going by, and the guy leave the table. We see our chance to get in. We put the quarters in and the balls are dispensed, except the green or 6 ball. The guy took it to the bathroom with him. At this point, it was ridiculous and we notified the manager. The manager noted it was 12:30 and they were going to be calling last call and closing, so he didn't want to make a scene by kicking him out. He gets us another ball so we can play. The guy comes out of the bathroom and knows we realized what he did. He smirks and proceeds to the patio to have a cigarette, bringing along his beer and the green billiard ball. The guy comes back in and tossed the ball he was holding onto the table, hitting a few balls on the table and messing up our game. He goes up to the bar just in time for last call. One of the friends I was with suggested we follow him home and each call the highway patrol to report a suspected drunk driver. 3 of 4 of us agree. So when he leaves, we used our trusty Nextel push-to-talk phones and coordinated several calls to the police. We provided details like license plate, vehicle make and model and color, and mentioned the car nearly hit another vehicle, was swerving between lines and driving erratically. This was under a 15-minute plan. We had no idea where the guy lived, but suspected it was close as he was visiting a neighborhood place, so our time was limited. The one guy who didn't notify the police tailed the jerk and called us giddy when a police officer pulled between him and the guy and turned in his lights to pull him over. The police blotter that week included an arrested of a guy who was pulled over after multiple calls of erratic driving. He wasn't arrested for DWI, but instead for driving on a suspended license. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Back before the COVID pandemic, I was participating in the Disney College program at the Disneyland Resort in Anaheim, California. The program director sent out an email to all of the participants 2 weeks before the end of the program, providing details regarding the end-of-program celebration. We were all expecting a casual dress code, since this would be the conclusion of our time working at the Disneyland Resort and would take place inside California Adventure Park after hours, instead of the mid-program celebration that took place in the Disneyland Hotel Ballroom. However, the email informed us that due to the celebration taking place in front of Guardians of the Galaxy, Mission Breakout, we were expected to wear Galaxy Retro attire. Even though a few sample photos were attached, showing people wearing silver face paint and mid-century skirts, we were all very confused about what exactly Galaxy Retro was, or how we were supposed to put together an elaborate costume in less than 2 weeks. Keep in mind that despite the Disney College program being marketed toward up-and-coming young professionals, we were all poor college students, working full-time in a busy, hot, exhausting theme park and living in crowded apartments with our fellow participants. Who had the time or money to scrape together a Galaxy Retro outfit? Not me, and apparently almost no one else either. So my 4 roommates and I hatched a plan. We visited a local screen printer and asked them how long it would take to print 5 custom t-shirts. We were told that if we were okay with plain white text printed on just the front of 5 plain black t-shirts, 1 for me and 1 for each of my roommates, then they could complete the order within a few days. The text on each t-shirt read, "Sorry, this is the best I can do for Galaxy Retro." The total cost of the custom-printed t-shirts was around $25 to $30. We showed up at the end program celebration wearing blue jeans and our custom black t-shirts and insisted on taking a selfie with the program director herself. Thankfully, she had a sense of humor and realized her mistake when pretty much all of the other college program participants wore whatever they wanted instead of Galaxy Retro. Because, after all, no one cared about dress code when it was literally the last day of our employment at Disney. The next one is an entitled people story. Let me start the story by saying, I never thought my sister and I would be in this position. Even though we were several years apart, as we became adults, I thought we were close. It wasn't until Karen married Todd that the envy and negativities started to grow. Over the years, I have become friends with some of Karen and Todd's friends. Well, at least some of them through weddings, parties, etc. One of Todd's friends has told me over the last couple years that from the time Todd started dating Karen, Todd called me spoiled, born with a silver spoon in my mouth, saying negative things behind my back. I was 15 at the time. None of it was true. I was more of a go-getter than Karen. I did better in school and in sports and had many activities going on. That was just me, and that's how I was happy. I never had things handed to me. Yes, my parents helped pay for some things, but they also did that for Karen. My parents can attest to that. When I had my first baby, Karen and Todd's first child was already 7, and their second one was already 2. Karen and Todd lived in a town close to my parents. I lived in a state 12 hours away. Karen and Todd became accustomed to having my parents around more simply due to geographics. Pop was still working and Mum was retired and would occasionally fly out to see me when she could. I would also trek back home and stay for a couple weeks at a time as I was not going to work my first year. I was happy that my child would be near his cousins. 5 years later, we had the opportunity to move back to my hometown and be near my parents and Karen and her family. I just had my second baby. That's when I really started to notice things. The jealousy was enough to paint the town green. My parents love all their grandchildren. They went and supported every dance, every basketball game, every hockey game, every soccer game, every concert. You get the picture. This was for each kid. In their 80s and getting frail, they still went to support the one grandchild who was a coach for a high basketball team. They drove around the local counties to go support him and his team. One of the things that was said to me several years ago from Karen was, my kids had Mum and Dad all to themselves until you came home. When Mum and Dad didn't come around as much because they were visiting and helping you, my kids wanted to know why Grandmum and Grandpop didn't love them anymore. Please. My response to Karen was, you and Todd, as the adults, should have explained to them that your grands love you. But they are trying to do everything with all their grandchildren. Instead, Karen and Todd fostered this selfish, jealous behavior in their kids. Let's step back to the time my niece was hospitalized and battling through a rare condition. Everyone under the planet that we knew brought them food, offered gift cards for groceries, did yard work for them, drove the kids to events. My parents pretty much took over care for the other kids, so Karen and Todd could stay in the hospital with my niece. I took my kids up as much as possible to visit their cousin. Fast forward some years, and within the friends and family group there were some unexpected traumas such as car accident leading to permanent disability, illness leading to disability, house fire leading to total loss of all possessions, deaths unexpectedly. Where were Karen and Todd during all of this to the people who supported them for several years? Nowhere to be found. Not a phone call, not an offer to help with anything. Showed up after a wake ended and then proceeded to follow the family to a local hall where refreshments were served and then idioted about what they are not getting from my parents because I am in the way. Hell, when I've been home battling cancer and after surgeries, I've never even received a message, and this was all prior to the biggest blow-up. So you are getting the gist that Todd and Karen are very selfish people. And talking amongst those who have suffered some of the traumas and were there for Todd and Karen, the level of disgust, disappointment, and extreme sadness is overwhelming. Karen and Todd just don't know how to be good friends with anybody. A friend of Karen's approached me approximately 10 years ago to tell me the plan that Karen was devising and talking about behind my back, about what property she would get and then what I would inherit, which would actually be sold to pay off any remaining bills. Karen found it humorous that I would walk away with nothing, in her mind. So for 10 years, Karen and Todd have been devising a plan that all of a sudden is not going to happen, and it is turning into rage and delusions. Karen and Todd did not use their money wisely over time. Todd wanted cars to feel like he fit better into a lawyer society. Karen trickled money away over the years on tchotchke toys that she would bring home every single day for all of the kids. In their mind, their retirement was going to be the 2 homes that were my parents', and they would pay for taxes and repairs with any remaining money. Over the last several years, Karen has tried to confuse and bully Mum and Dad into giving her the Southwestern home sign it into, in her name, and she would cover the taxes and payments and then told them that everybody would get a key and be able to use it. That was straight out bullcrap, because that will never happen. The last few times that most of the family gathered at the Southwestern home for time away, Karen and Todd became ogres of the property. They were mean and grouchy and snappy to everybody. Mum and Dad had been cooking to prepare a nice dinner one night, and everyone was on various spots of the property, either playing, helping do some maintenance work, etc. In the middle of the afternoon, Karen went in and made herself a plate of the food and came out on the patio and ate it in front of everyone. Her response was, "I'm going to eat when I want to eat. We have told Mum and Dad that that is the Karen we will get if you keep things 50-50. Since Karen doesn't think her life has been 50, she will make it absolutely miserable for my side of the family. After a good tidbit from a viewer, I am seeking advice from an estate planning lawyer who specializes in inheritance disputes in the case that my parents still decide not to take Karen off as executor of the estate. That's what it is at this point, a conscious decision to leave her on if they do not do something better. They have the time and the money to go seek advice, but it seems my father wishes to not spend money on this. I know that I cannot tell my parents what to do. It is heartbreaking that they are allowing the one person who is disparaging all of our names and hurting them mentally and emotionally to take charge of their estate once they're gone. That is the only thing that I have pleaded with them about. Nothing about division of inheritances, but to please choose a neutral and sound executor. Maybe more stories to come. Anyway, thank you for watching.